Sarah Martinez had always been different from the other kids in her small Texas town. While her classmates played video games after school, she was outside climbing trees, building forts, and challenging the neighborhood boys to races she almost always won. Her father, a retired Army sergeant, had raised her with military discipline after her mother died when Sarah was only 8 years old. "Strength comes from within, mija," he would tell her during their morning runs. "The world will try to tell you what you can and cannot do, but only you decide your limits." Those words shaped Sarah's entire childhood. She excelled in everything she touched: academics, athletics, and leadership. By her senior year of high school, she was valedictorian, captain of the track team, and president of the student council. Her teachers and coaches constantly praised her dedication and work ethic. When graduation approached, Sarah shocked everyone by announcing she planned to join the military instead of accepting the full scholarship to Stanford University that she had earned. Her guidance counselor, Mrs. Henderson, tried to change her mind during a private meeting. "Sarah, you're brilliant. You could become a doctor, a lawyer, anything you want. Why waste that potential in the military?" Sarah's jaw tightened. "Serving my country isn't a waste, Mrs. Henderson. It's an honor." The reactions from her classmates were even worse. Tommy Rodriguez, whose own grades barely qualified him for community college, laughed openly when he heard the news. "Girls don't belong in combat," he said loudly in the cafeteria, making sure everyone could hear. "She'll probably cry the first time someone yells at her." Sarah ignored the comments, but they stung more than she let on. Her best friend Jessica tried to be supportive, though her concern was obvious. "Are you sure about this, Sarah? I mean, the military is so rough, and you're so smart. You could do anything else." Even Jessica didn't really understand. Nobody did. The day after graduation, Sarah drove to the recruitment office in the neighboring city. Staff Sergeant Williams, a weathered man in his 40s, looked up from his paperwork as she walked in. "Let me guess. You want information for your boyfriend?" "No, sir. I want to enlist." Williams studied her carefully. Sarah stood straight, meeting his gaze directly. She was tall for a woman, about 5'8", with the lean muscle of a serious athlete. Her dark eyes held a determination that reminded him of the best soldiers he had known. "What branch?" he asked. "Army, sir. Infantry, if possible." Williams leaned back in his chair. "Infantry is tough, kid. Real tough. Are you sure you don't want something in administration or medical?" "I want to serve on the front lines, sir. I want to make a real difference." The recruitment process took several weeks. Sarah passed every test with flying colors: physical, mental, and psychological. Her ASVAB scores were in the 99th percentile. Her fitness scores exceeded the male standards. When the psychological evaluation was complete, the examiner noted her exceptional mental toughness and leadership potential. The night before she left for basic training, her father cooked her favorite meal, his mother's recipe for enchiladas. They ate mostly in silence, both understanding this was a major turning point. "I'm proud of you, mija," he finally said. "Your mother would be proud too." Sarah felt tears threatening, but held them back. "I'll make you both proud, Dad." "You already have." Basic training at Fort Moore was everything Sarah had expected and more. The drill sergeants were relentless. The physical demands were crushing, and the mental pressure was constant. But Sarah thrived. While other recruits struggled with the early morning runs, she finished near the front of the pack every time. When others broke down during the stress positions and verbal harassment, she remained calm and focused. Drill Sergeant Martinez, no relation, despite the name, took special notice of her performance. He had trained thousands of soldiers over his career. And Sarah stood out not just for her abilities, but for her attitude. She never complained, never made excuses, and consistently encouraged her fellow recruits when they struggled. "Martinez! he barked at her during the 6th week of training. "Why aren't you officer material? You've got the scores for it." "I want to be a soldier first, drill sergeant. Learn from the ground up." He nodded with what might have been approval. Outstanding recruit. The other recruits respected Sarah, though some of the male soldiers from more traditional backgrounds initially resented taking orders from a woman during leadership exercises. That changed during the field training exercise in Week 8. Private Johnson, a large man from rural Alabama, had twisted his ankle badly during a night navigation course. The injury was serious enough that he couldn't walk, but not serious enough to call for emergency evacuation. Sarah, serving as squad leader for the exercise, made the decision to carry Johnson's pack in addition to her own, while 2 other soldiers helped him walk. For 12 miles through rough terrain, Sarah carried nearly 100 pounds of gear without complaint. When they reached the checkpoint, she immediately began treating Johnson's ankle with the first aid training they had received. Only after ensuring he was properly cared for did she attend to her own exhaustion. Johnson never questioned her authority again. Word spread through the company about what had happened, and Sarah's reputation was cemented. Graduation from basic training was a proud moment. Sarah's father made the long drive to attend the ceremony, his chest swelling with pride as he watched his daughter receive multiple awards: Honor Graduate, Physical Fitness Award, and the coveted Leadership Award. But the celebration was short-lived. Sarah's first assignment was to Fort Campbell with the 101st Airborne Division. She was excited to finally begin her real military career, eager to prove herself in an operational unit. She arrived at Fort Campbell on a hot August morning, her duffel bag slung over her shoulder and her head high. The base was massive, busy with helicopters, vehicles, and soldiers moving with purpose. Sarah felt like she was exactly where she belonged. Her new unit was Bravo Company, 2nd Battalion. The company commander, Captain Torres, was a combat veteran who had served multiple deployments in Afghanistan. He reviewed Sarah's file while she stood at attention in his office. "Impressive scores, Martinez. Top of your class in everything." "Thank you, sir. But this isn't basic training anymore. This is the real Army. You'll need to prove yourself all over again." "Understood, sir." What Sarah didn't understand was just how much harder that would be than anything she had faced so far. Her new platoon sergeant, Staff Sergeant Coleman, was a 20-year veteran who made no effort to hide his skepticism about having a woman in his platoon. "Listen up, Martinez," he said during her first day. "I don't care what you did in basic training. This is an infantry unit. We deploy to combat zones. The men in this platoon need to trust that their teammates can handle anything. You're going to have to earn that trust." Sarah nodded. "I understand, Sergeant. I'm ready to prove myself." Coleman's expression suggested he doubted that very much. The next few months were the most challenging of Sarah's life. The physical demands of infantry training were brutal. Long ruck marches with heavy packs, advanced weapons training, combat exercises that lasted for days with minimal sleep. Sarah pushed herself to excel in every area, often staying after official training hours to practice skills she felt needed improvement. But the real challenge wasn't physical. It was the constant need to prove herself to soldiers who had already decided she didn't belong. Every mistake was magnified. Every success was dismissed as luck or special treatment. When she excelled at marksmanship, they said the targets were too easy. When she outperformed men on fitness tests, they claimed the standards were different for women. The breaking point came during a field training exercise in November. Sarah's squad was conducting a night patrol when they encountered an enemy force during the simulation. The exercise called for complex tactical movements under pressure, with multiple squads coordinating their actions. Sarah had been studying tactics intensively, reading every manual she could find and seeking advice from experienced soldiers. When the squad leader was killed in the simulation, she took command and quickly developed a plan to outflank the opposing force. Her tactics worked perfectly. The squad successfully completed their mission with no additional casualties, earning praise from the exercise controllers. But instead of recognition, Sarah faced resentment from some of her squad mates. "Teacher's pet," muttered Private Stevens, a soldier who had struggled throughout the exercise. Probably had someone tell her the answers ahead of time. "Maybe if you spent more time studying tactics and less time complaining, you'd understand what she did," replied Corporal Washington, one of the few soldiers who had consistently supported Sarah. The tension erupted into a heated argument back at the base. Stevens, encouraged by several other soldiers who shared his views, became increasingly aggressive in his accusations. He claimed Sarah was receiving special treatment, that women had no business in infantry units, and that she was a danger to real soldiers. "You want to play soldier?" Stevens shouted, his face red with anger. "This isn't a game. When we deploy for real, people die because someone can't do their job." Sarah kept her composure despite the personal attacks. "I've met every standard, Stevens. My performance speaks for itself." "Standards," Stevens sneered. "Different standards for women. Everyone knows it." The argument was finally broken up by Staff Sergeant Coleman, who ordered everyone back to their barracks. But the damage was done. The unit was divided, and Sarah found herself increasingly isolated from many of her fellow soldiers. The situation came to a head 3 weeks later during what should have been a routine training day. Sarah had been selected for additional leadership training, an honor that recognized her tactical knowledge and leadership potential. But several soldiers, led by Stevens, saw it as confirmation of their belief that she was receiving special treatment. That evening, as Sarah returned from the leadership course, she found a crowd gathered around the company area. Smoke was rising from a metal trash can, and soldiers were laughing and cheering. As she got closer, she realized what was burning. Someone had taken her spare uniform from her wall locker and thrown it into the fire. The jacket with her name tape, the pants she had carefully pressed that morning, the shirt she had worn with pride. All of it was being consumed by flames while her fellow soldiers celebrated. Stevens stood closest to the fire, holding a beer and grinning widely. "Oops," he said when he saw her approaching. "Looks like someone's costume caught fire." Sarah stared at the burning uniform, feeling a mixture of hurt, anger, and determination washing over her. The soldiers around the fire grew quiet as they realized she was there, but none of them seemed sorry for what they had done. Staff Sergeant Coleman appeared from the company headquarters building, took one look at the scene, and immediately began shouting at the soldiers to disperse. But Sarah barely heard him. She was staring into the flames, watching her uniform turn to ash and making a decision that would change everything. Without saying a word, she turned and walked back to her barracks. Behind her, she could hear Coleman demanding to know who was responsible. But she knew nothing would really change. Tomorrow there would be paperwork and maybe some punishment details, but the underlying attitude would remain the same. Sarah sat on her bunk and pulled out. The process of transferring from the Army to the Navy was more complicated than Sarah had imagined. It took 6 months of paperwork, interviews, and negotiations between different military bureaucracies. During that time, she remained with her Army unit, enduring the continued hostility from some soldiers, while quietly preparing for the most challenging endeavor of her life. Sarah spent every free moment researching naval special warfare and the SEAL program. She learned that women had only recently been allowed to attempt SEAL training and that none had successfully completed the full program yet. The statistics were daunting. Even among male candidates, the failure rate was over 80%. But rather than discouraging her, the numbers motivated Sarah even more. She began training with an intensity that bordered on obsession. She was already in excellent physical condition from her Army infantry training, but SEAL standards were in a different category entirely. Her typical day began at 4 in the morning with a 5-mile run, followed by an hour of swimming at the base pool. She practiced underwater breath-holding exercises until her lungs burned. She did thousands of push-ups, pull-ups, and sit-ups. She studied Navy terminology, memorized rank structures, and read everything she could find about maritime operations. The other soldiers in her unit watched her preparation with a mixture of amusement and skepticism. Stevens, who had organized the uniform burning, made frequent jokes about her delusional goals. "Seals?" he would say loudly whenever Sarah passed. "Yeah, right. She'll wash out in the first week." Staff Sergeant Coleman, however, had begun to view Sarah differently. He had conducted his own research into the SEAL program and understood exactly how difficult it would be. Despite his initial doubts about women in infantry units, he had to respect Sarah's determination and the incredible standards she was trying to meet. "Martinez," he said one day after observing her training, "you know what you're getting into?" "Yes, Sergeant." Bud-S training makes infantry school look like summer camp, and that's just the beginning. Sarah met his gaze steadily. "I understand, Sergeant." Coleman nodded slowly. "I believe you might actually have a shot at this. Don't make me wrong." When Sarah's transfer was finally approved, she said goodbye to the few soldiers who had supported her. Corporal Washington shook her hand and wished her luck. "Prove them all wrong," he said quietly. "Show them what you're really made of." Sarah arrived at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado in California on a sunny April morning. The base was located on a peninsula near San Diego, surrounded by beautiful beaches that would soon become the site of some of the most grueling training in the world. Her first stop was the Naval Special Warfare Center, where she would begin the basic underwater demolition SEAL training program known as BUD-S. The building was unassuming from the outside, but Sarah felt a sense of anticipation as she walked through the doors. The intake process was thorough and intimidating. Medical examinations, psychological evaluations, and administrative processing took 3 days to complete. Sarah was assigned to Class 347, which would begin training in 2 weeks. During those 2 weeks, she continued her preparation while getting familiar with her new environment. The base had a different culture than the Army installation she was used to. The Navy personnel moved with a quiet confidence that came from being part of an elite organization. Sarah's new barracks roommate was Seaman Jennifer Walsh, a Navy communications specialist who had been at Coronado for 6 months. "So you're the one trying for Bud-S," Walsh said the first night. "I've heard about you. Everyone has." "Good things, I hope." Walsh laughed. "People are curious mostly. A few think it's publicity stunt. Others think you might actually have a chance. What do you think?" "I think you must be either very brave or completely insane to attempt it." "Maybe both." The first day of Bud's training began at 5 in the morning with a formation on the beach. Sarah stood with 43 other candidates, all male, all looking nervous despite their attempts to appear confident. They were a diverse group, former college athletes, Marines, Army soldiers like herself, and Navy personnel seeking to challenge themselves in the ultimate test. The Bud-S instructors were legends. These were active-duty SEALs who had volunteered to return to training to forge the next generation of operators. They moved with the fluid grace of predators, their eyes constantly evaluating every candidate. The lead instructor was Senior Chief Petty Officer Reynolds, a 15-year SEAL veteran with multiple combat deployments. His weathered face showed no emotion as he addressed the class. "Welcome to Bud-S. Look around you. Statistically, 35 of you will quit before we're done. Of the remaining 8 or 9, only 5 or 6 will actually graduate and earn the right to call themselves SEALs." His eyes found Sarah in the formation. "Some of you are here to make history. Some are here to prove points. None of that matters. The only thing that matters is whether you can meet the standards and perform under pressure. The ocean doesn't care about your gender, your background, or your motivation. It will try to kill you regardless." The physical training began immediately and was unlike anything Sarah had experienced. The Army had been tough, but this was systematic torture designed to break the weak and forge the strong. They ran everywhere, to meals, to training, to medical appointments. The runs were conducted in combat boots on soft sand, which made every step exponentially more difficult. Sarah's legs burned constantly, and her feet were a mass of blisters within days. The pool workouts were worse. Underwater exercises where candidates had to hold their breath until they nearly passed out, swimming endless laps in full uniform and boots. Drown-proofing exercises where their hands and feet were tied while they had to survive in deep water. Sarah discovered muscles she never knew existed. Every morning she woke up in agony, her body screaming in protest. But she forced herself up and continued. The alternative was unthinkable. The psychological pressure was constant. The instructors seemed to delight in finding each candidate's breaking point. They yelled constantly, assigned impossible tasks with ridiculous time limits, and created scenarios designed to induce panic and confusion. "Martinez!" Senior Chief Reynolds would bellow. "Why are you here? What makes you think you belong with these men?" "I want to serve my country at the highest level, Senior Chief. Louder, I can't hear you." "I want to serve my country at the highest level, Senior Chief." "That's what they all say. We'll see if you mean it when things get really hard." The other candidates' attitudes toward Sarah varied. Some were supportive, recognizing her dedication and performance. Others resented her presence, believing she was receiving special attention or that her inclusion lowered standards. Candidate Johnson, a former Marine, became one of her strongest supporters after she helped him through a particularly difficult swim exercise. "You saved my ass out there," he told her afterward. "Anyone who says you don't belong here is an idiot." But candidate Morrison, a former college football player, made no secret of his belief that women didn't belong in special operations. "This is about life and death," he said during a break in training. "When we're deployed, I need to know that everyone can carry their weight, literally." Sarah's response was simple and direct. "Then watch me prove that I can." The first major test came during the 4th week, Hell Week, 5.5 days of continuous training with a total of 4 hours of sleep. It was designed to push candidates beyond their physical and mental limits, to see who would quit and who would find a way to continue. Sarah had studied Hell Week extensively, but nothing could have prepared her for the reality. The training began on Sunday evening and continued without pause. Running, swimming, carrying heavy boats, crawling through mud, and performing calisthenics in freezing surf. The instructors rotated in shifts to stay fresh while the candidates grew increasingly exhausted. They used psychological tactics, loud music, and sleep deprivation to break down resistance. The famous bell that candidates could ring to quit was always visible, a constant temptation. By Wednesday morning, 15 candidates had quit. Sarah was still there, but barely. Her body was shutting down, her mind was foggy with exhaustion, and her hands were so swollen she could barely grip anything. During one particularly brutal surf session, where candidates had to link arms and sit in the freezing ocean while waves crashed over them, Sarah began to hallucinate. The cold was so intense, it felt like her bones were freezing. Several candidates around her were shaking uncontrollably. Morrison, the football player who had questioned her presence, suddenly stood up and walked toward the bell. Sarah watched him through her delirium, understanding that another strong candidate was giving up. But instead of quitting, Morrison stopped at the instructors. "Senior Chief, Martinez needs medical attention. I think she might have hypothermia." Reynolds looked at Sarah, who was still sitting in the surf despite her obvious distress. "Martinez, you okay?" Sarah tried to answer but couldn't form words. Her core temperature had dropped dangerously low. The medical corpsman pulled her from the water and began warming procedures. For 30 minutes, Sarah thought her Hell Week might be over due to medical issues rather than quitting. "Can you continue?" the corpsman asked once her temperature had stabilized. Sarah's answer was to stand up and walk back toward the training area. Morrison caught up with her. "Why did you help me?" she asked through chattering teeth. "Because you've earned it," he said simply. "I was wrong about you." Thursday was the worst day. Candidates had to carry inflatable boats everywhere, perform complex exercises while carrying telephone poles, and navigate obstacle courses on no sleep. Sarah's body was operating purely on willpower and muscle memory. During one boat exercise, her team had to carry their boat for 5 miles across the beach and through the surf zone. Sarah was the smallest member of the team, but she refused to take a lighter position. She carried her full share of the weight even as her shoulders screamed in agony. Friday morning arrived like a miracle. Hell Week was almost over. Only 17 candidates remained from the original 44. Sarah was among them, battered and exhausted, but still standing. The final event was a 4-mile timed run. Sarah's legs felt like concrete, but she forced one foot in front of the other. She finished within the required time, crossed the finish line, and immediately collapsed. Senior Chief Reynolds approached as she lay on the sand, too exhausted to move. "Outstanding work, Martinez. You just completed something that 99% of people couldn't even attempt." Sarah managed to sit up. "Thank you, Senior Chief." "Don't thank me yet. Hell Week was just the first phase. We've got a long way to go." The remaining phases of Bud S were equally challenging. Combat diving, where Sarah learned to use underwater breathing apparatus and navigate in zero visibility. Land warfare, where she mastered weapons, tactics, and survival skills. Each phase eliminated more candidates. By the time Sarah reached the final phase, only 9 candidates remained from the original class. She had survived longer than anyone expected, including herself. But the hardest test was still ahead. The final exercise was a simulated combat mission that would determine who truly had what it took to become a SEAL. Sarah and the remaining candidates would be pushed to their absolute limits one more time. As she prepared for the final challenge, Sarah thought about the soldiers who had burned her uniform months earlier. They had tried to break her spirit, to convince her she didn't belong. Instead, they had forged her into something stronger than they could imagine. The little girl from Texas who had always been different was about to become something extraordinary. She was about to become a weapon forged by fire, determination, and an unbreakable will to succeed. Her phone. She scrolled through her contacts until she found the number for the Navy recruiting station she had researched months earlier but never contacted. Her finger hesitated over the call button for only a moment. If they wanted to burn her Army uniform, fine. She would find another way to serve her country. A harder way. A way that would force them to respect her whether they wanted to or not. The phone rang twice before a voice answered. "Navy recruiting, Petty Officer Martinez speaking." "Hi," Sarah said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one else could hear. "I'm interested in information about becoming a Navy SEAL." The final exercise took place during week 26 of Bud S training. Sarah and the 8 remaining candidates were transported to a remote training area where they would face their ultimate test. The mission was classified, but the instructors made it clear that this would determine who earned the right to continue to SEAL qualification training. Sarah had changed dramatically over the past 6 months. Her body had been sculpted by the relentless training into something harder and more capable than she had ever imagined. Her mind had been forged in the crucible of constant pressure and challenge. But more importantly, her spirit had been tested and proven unbreakable. The final exercise began at midnight on a moonless Wednesday. The candidates were given a complex mission involving infiltration, reconnaissance, and extraction while being hunted by a team of experienced SEALs playing the enemy. They had 72 hours to complete objectives that would require every skill they had learned. Sarah's team consisted of 3 candidates: herself, Morrison, the former football player who had helped her during Hell Week, and Rodriguez, a former Navy electronics technician. They had worked together for months and had developed the kind of trust that only comes from shared suffering. The mission started with a nighttime water insertion 2 miles off the coast. They had to swim to shore while carrying waterproof equipment bags, navigate through enemy patrols, and establish a surveillance position overlooking a mock terrorist compound. The swim was brutal. The water was cold, the current was strong, and the equipment bags made every stroke difficult. Sarah had become a powerful swimmer during Bud S, but this pushed her to her limits. Rodriguez began to struggle halfway to shore, his smaller frame working against him in the rough conditions. Without hesitation, Sarah moved closer and helped support his equipment bag while maintaining her own swimming rhythm. Morrison noticed and did the same from the other side. The three of them reached the shore together, exhausted but successful. "Thanks," Rodriguez whispered as they dragged themselves onto the beach. "I wouldn't have made it." "We all make it or none of us do," Sarah replied, echoing the SEAL ethos that had been drilled into them for months. The next 48 hours tested every skill they had learned. They evaded multiple search patrols while moving through hostile territory. They established surveillance positions and gathered intelligence using sophisticated equipment. They communicated with headquarters using encryption codes and radio protocols. But the real test came on Friday afternoon when they were discovered by a patrol and had to fight their way to the extraction point. Using blank ammunition and simulation equipment, they engaged in a running firefight while moving toward their pickup location. Sarah found herself separated from her teammates during the chaos. She was alone, being pursued by 3 enemy instructors who were intent on capturing her before she could reach safety. This was the moment she had been preparing for since the day her uniform was burned, the moment when she would prove once and for all that she belonged. Using every tactic she had learned, Sarah evaded the patrol, navigated through difficult terrain, and reached the extraction point just as the helicopter arrived. Morrison and Rodriguez were already there, having taken a different route to safety. "Outstanding," said Chief Petty Officer Harrison, who had been evaluating their performance. "That was textbook special operations." When the exercise ended and the candidates were brought together for debrief, Senior Chief Reynolds addressed them with something that might have been pride in his voice. "You 9 have accomplished something extraordinary. You've completed Bud S training and proven that you have what it takes to continue to SQT. But remember, earning your trident is still months away." Sarah felt a surge of emotion that she quickly controlled. She had done it. She had survived the most difficult military training in the world and proven that she belonged among the elite. The graduation ceremony 3 days later was attended by families, Navy officials, and active duty SEALs. Sarah's father had flown in from Texas, his pride evident in every gesture. As she stood in formation wearing her Navy dress uniform, Sarah thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. "Class 347, announced the commanding officer of Naval Special Warfare Center. "You have completed basic underwater demolition SEAL training. You are now eligible to continue to SEAL qualification training. Your dedication, sacrifice, and performance have earned you the respect of this command and the Naval Special Warfare community." The ceremony was formal and dignified, but Sarah's proudest moment came afterward when Senior Chief Reynolds approached her privately. "Martinez, I want you to know something. I've been an instructor here for 4 years and trained over 300 candidates. You're among the top 5 performers I've ever seen, regardless of gender. You've earned your place here through merit alone." "Thank you, Senior Chief. That means everything to me." "Don't let it go to your head. SQT is going to be even harder. But if anyone can handle it, you can." SEAL qualification training lasted another 6 months. Advanced weapons training, combat medicine, demolitions, advanced diving techniques, and specialized skills that would prepare them for actual operations. Sarah excelled in every area, particularly in combat medicine where her attention to detail and steady hands under pressure made her invaluable. By the time SQT concluded, only 7 candidates from the original Bud S class remained. Sarah was among them, and on a bright December morning, she finally earned the right to wear the SEAL trident on her uniform. The Trident ceremony was smaller and more intimate than Bud's graduation. Each new SEAL was pinned with their trident by a senior team member, signifying their acceptance into one of the most elite military units in the world. Petty Officer First Class Sarah Martinez was now officially a Navy SEAL. Her first assignment was to SEAL Team 7 based at Coronado. She spent the next 8 months in advanced training, learning specialized skills, and integrating with her new team. Her teammates were professionals who judged her solely on her performance, and Sarah quickly established herself as a valuable member of the unit. Her first deployment was to Afghanistan, where she participated in multiple combat operations. Sarah's medical training made her the team's corpsman, and she saved 3 lives during her first deployment. Her teammates' respect was absolute. She had proven herself under the ultimate test of real combat. When Sarah returned from deployment after 8 months overseas, she was a different person than the young woman who had left Texas 2 years earlier. She was harder, more confident, and possessed of skills that few people in the world could match. She was a weapon forged by the finest military training system ever created, but she was also still human, and there was something she needed to do. Sarah requested leave and drove back to Texas in her personal vehicle. She had been home briefly after earning her trident, but this trip had a different purpose. She had received word that her old Army unit was conducting a training exercise at Fort Campbell, and several of the soldiers who had been involved in burning her uniform were still assigned there. Sarah arrived at Fort Campbell on a Tuesday morning wearing her navy dress blue uniform with her SEAL trident prominently displayed. She had called ahead and arranged to visit the base through proper channels, ostensibly to speak with soldiers about Navy career opportunities. The reunion with Staff Sergeant Coleman was warm. He had been promoted since Sarah left and was now the first sergeant of the company. His respect for what Sarah had accomplished was obvious and genuine. "I knew you had something special," he told her over coffee in the company headquarters. "But SEAL, that's beyond what I imagined anyone could accomplish." "Thank you, First Sergeant. Your training and leadership helped prepare me." Coleman grew serious. "There's something you should know. Stevens and his group, they're still talking about what they did to your uniform. Some of them still think it was justified. Are they here now?" "Stevens is. He's got about 6 months left on his enlistment. Never made it past private first class. Some of the others have moved on." Sarah nodded. "I'd like to address the company, if that's possible, about Navy opportunities and my experiences." Coleman smiled slightly. "I think that can be arranged." That afternoon, Bravo Company assembled in the company area for what they had been told was a recruiting presentation. Most of the soldiers paid little attention as they formed up, expecting a boring talk from some Navy recruiter. When Sarah walked out in front of the formation, the reaction was immediate. Soldiers who remembered her began whispering to others, explaining who she was. Stevens, standing in the 3rd row, went pale when he recognized her. "Good afternoon," Sarah began, her voice carrying the confidence that came from 2 years of elite military training. "My name is Petty Officer First Class Sarah Martinez. Some of you may remember me from when I served with this unit as Private Martinez." The company was completely silent now. Every soldier was staring at her, taking in the SEAL trident on her chest and the ribbon rack that told the story of her accomplishments. 2 years ago, someone in this unit burned my Army uniform. They threw it in a trash can and set it on fire while other soldiers watched and cheered. Sarah's eyes found Stevens in the formation. He was staring at the ground, his face red with embarrassment and shame. "I want to thank whoever did that," Sarah continued, her voice steady and clear, "because burning that uniform set me on a path that led to this moment. It motivated me to push beyond what I thought was possible. It drove me to earn something that less than 1% of military personnel ever achieve." She gestured to the trident on her chest. "I am now a graduate of the most difficult military training in the world. I have served in combat operations where lives depended on my skills and performance. I have proven myself among the finest warriors our nation has ever produced." The formation remained absolutely silent. Several soldiers were staring at Stevens, who continued to avoid eye contact. The person who burned my uniform thought they were destroying something. Instead, they forged something stronger. They thought they were ending my military career. Instead, they launched me toward greatness. Sarah paused, letting her words sink in. "I'm not here for revenge or to embarrass anyone. I'm here to say thank you. Thank you for showing me exactly who I didn't want to be. Thank you for motivating me to exceed every limit you thought I had." She looked directly at Stevens now, who finally met her gaze. "Some of you will continue to believe that women don't belong in combat units. That's your right. But you can never again say that we can't meet the standards, because I have met standards that most of you will never even attempt." Sarah's voice grew stronger. "I want every soldier here to understand something. Your limitations are not universal truths. Your prejudices are not facts. Your doubts about others say more about you than about them." She gestured to her uniform again. "This trident represents something that seemed impossible when I was serving in this unit. But impossible things become possible when you refuse to accept other people's limitations." Sarah concluded her remarks and took questions from the soldiers. Most were about SEAL training and her experiences, but a few asked about her motivation and how she had overcome the challenges she faced. After the formation was dismissed, Stevens approached her hesitantly. Several other soldiers watched from a distance, curious about the confrontation. "Martinez. Petty Officer Martinez," he began awkwardly. "I owe you an apology." Sarah studied him for a moment. Stevens looked older than his years, worn down by 2 years of going nowhere in his military career. "You don't owe me anything, Stevens. You gave me exactly what I needed, even if that wasn't your intention. But what we did was wrong. It was unprofessional and disrespectful." "Yes, it was. But it's over now." Stevens nodded, clearly struggling with his words. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. And I was wrong about everything. I know you are. The question is, what are you going to do with that knowledge?" Stevens didn't have an answer, but Sarah could see that he was genuinely reflecting on his actions and attitudes. As Sarah prepared to leave Fort Campbell that evening, she felt a sense of closure that she hadn't expected. The anger and hurt that had motivated her for 2 years had transformed into something else. A quiet satisfaction that came from proving herself in the most demanding way possible. She thought about the young woman who had joined the army full of dreams and determination. That woman had been broken by prejudice and small-minded thinking, but she had risen from those ashes to become something extraordinary. Driving away from the base, Sarah realized that she no longer needed the validation of the soldiers who had doubted her. Their opinions had become irrelevant. She had found her place among warriors who judged her solely on her actions and abilities. The uniform they had burned in anger and ignorance had been replaced by something far more valuable, a uniform that represented the highest standards of military excellence, and a community that had accepted her as an equal. Sarah Martinez had become exactly what she had always been destined to be. She just had to travel through fire to get there. As she drove through the Kentucky night toward her new life, Sarah smiled at the irony of it all. They had tried to destroy her dreams by burning her uniform. Instead, they had forged her into someone who wore a uniform that most people could never earn. Sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as the worst moments. Sometimes being broken down is the first step toward becoming unbreakable. And sometimes, when people try to burn your dreams, you simply rise from the ashes wearing something even better.